Hi, it's Anne-Marie from Charmed Life Therapy. It's Messy Monday and things are relatively quiet, so I was basically just sat having my breakfast and allowing my mind to wander as I sometimes do. So I might stop and start a bit because I've got notes, because it's just been the random thoughts going through my brain. But please do hit that like and subscribe if you are enjoying this content at all. I'm enjoying the interplay between us all, and the way it's really more like a morale exercise, I think. This business of keeping ourselves on a certain equilibrium while we wait for things to swing in the way, in the direction that we think it should sway. So I caught a little bit of Not Actually Golden this morning, and she was talking about how there's been a lot of negative reaction to that little snippet of the deposition that was released, this idea of Blake having no personal knowledge of a smear campaign other than what Brian Friedman put in the press and was in the lawsuit, in the amended complaint, Justin's complaint, I guess, because there's been a lot of outcry about it. So she was just clarifying what actually personal knowledge means. So I'm crediting her with that, and apologies if I've got anything wrong in my own head that wasn't what she said. So it's basically, she has to kind of say that because if they'd have tried to quiz her on what the terms of this smear campaign was, her lawyer would have stepped in and said, we've had discussions between us about that, we can't answer that because it's privileged information, attorney-client and all of that. So she can testify, so she'll get up on the stand and testify basically to what she's seen and heard with her own eyes and ears. And I was sat listening to this video and I was waiting for her to say what she feels. And she didn't, Not Actually Golden didn't say that. So I thought, oh, but in my mind, a lot of what Blake is banging on about is what she feels has happened rather than what she saw or what she heard. But anyway, basically, she can't get on the stand and be like an expert witness and say, this is what this smear campaign looked like, this person did that and that happened exactly, and they needed this knowledge in order to do that, and this is the way these things work. That's either going to be an expert witness or they'll get Jed Wallace up there or whatever it is and cross-examine him. So she can only testify to what she saw or heard with her own eyes and ears. Anything else is probably going to be hearsay. You know, if she knows that so-and-so did this, or she was made aware that so-and-so did that. And it's kind of like a grey area to me, because it's like the Stephanie Jones thing. Because what Not Actually Golden said was that any document she sent out or came to her, she called that personal knowledge. And then also I was thinking, because not only Golden said that the docs she got from Stephanie Jones don't count as personal knowledge, and I guess that's because it come through a filter of Stephanie Jones. But then the query that pops into my mind was, well, how did she know Stephanie Jones had them? You know, if you're looking at it from the outside, I mean, we know how she knew, kind of thing, but it's like if you're talking a legal argument, this is why the Van Zandt subpoena and looking at that is so important. So Not Actually Golden was saying it's about what conduct she experienced, you know, in terms of she'll have to talk about the SH and the days it happened and what that looked like and all of that. And she'll also have to testify to things like this business of that she couldn't get out of bed afterwards, she couldn't look after her children, her life had limitations in some way. And you know, you've got to think that she's going to have to explain how she could go to the Time 100 gala and things like that, how she could go to SNL, how she could go on Seth Meyers. And that also is kind of a grey area, because many people with depression or that are going through a lot of stuff, you won't really notice it on the surface because they'll be putting on the best face forward and all of that. But she'll have to kind of try and prove this idea, well, it's not just the garden variety aspect of it, but she'll have to prove that she was damaged in some way, that it altered her life. So she, as the plaintiff, doesn't have to carry all the knowledge of how it was all orchestrated. What is in her brain is her evidence, along with documents she created or received at the time. So that's where the Stephanie Jones thing slightly confuses me. So she can't testify about the adverse action, which is the smear campaign that happened as a result of her workplace complaint, basically, because that's the thing. She also has to, prove that there was this adverse employment experience that she had. So she's not going to go on the stand and testify about the mechanics of that smear campaign. Other people are going to have to do that. And as I said, things that other people have told her are just going to be hearsay. So where was I going to go from that? Because my mind was just, I've been aware in the last couple of days of this business of there's a content creator now in Latin America. Somebody said Argentina. I don't know if that's accurate. So what was his name? He's, I might be saying this wrong, Del Carajo TV. So he's saying now that he's been subpoenaed and he has something like 1.5 million subscribers. And I guess being Latin Americans, they're probably quite passionate subscribers and supporters of him. So everybody's saying now what a big mistake this is. And I guess we're sitting on waiting whether that's clarified and whether it's true. And, because we have to kind of bear in mind some people might say that they've been subpoenaed and they haven't been. We don't know. So that's on him to kind of prove or do something about it if he has to. But I was also watching, finally caught a bit of the Elsrich interview on Billy Bush's Hot Mics. So I was watching Elsie, and it triggered off in my mind because she was saying, where's my subpoena? And I remember at the time when those subpoenas were first coming out, and there were a few collaborations with the content creators that went on at that time, and I thought, I bet Elsie's quite kind of a little bit disappointed in a way that she didn't get a subpoena. And I found it interesting at the time, and now with Elsie, it just kind of popped back into my mind about this business of the subpoenas. And I know the other day I was saying that Blake seems less worried about being considered a racist than she does a 0-time Oscar-nominated actress. But it just popped into my mind this morning that has anybody been subpoenaed? Has any of these content creators, Etienne, have any of them been black? And I found that a little bit interesting because I thought, now, in terms of what appears as a threat to her, I would say that Elsrich is up there because she's been very feisty, she's been very out there, she's not watched her language, she's been very clear she was Team Baldoni, she's been clear she was biased, clear that she was favouriting him. She's insulted Blake as much as Perez Hilton has, in a very direct way, not necessarily a funny way. She's just flat out called it as it is. So you would think if anybody was going to be a checkbox in Blake Lively's mind, that somebody like Elsie, who's clearly biased towards Justin, would be one that you would be interested in subpoenaing. And it's like, well, mainly, for the most part, a lot of these subpoenas have been white women, haven't they? Which I think is quite interesting. I mean, even in terms of the Latin American guy, and Perez, I guess, who is Latin American. I think he's a Cuban originally, or Cuban ancestry. Would Blake Lively even think of them as a different ethnicity or different background or anything like that? Would she be just honed in on, is somebody white or is somebody black? And I can't be seen to be attacking a black person. And that kind of led to me thinking how crazy it is. What was her criteria here when she was cherry picking who she believed was in on the smear campaign and being paid by Brian Friedman and who wasn't? It was all over the shop, wasn't it, between Janessa with the astrology and under 300 subscribers at the time, and the girl that had just the one subscriber. She was bigger on another platform, but she just had one subscriber on the platform that Blake decided to subpoena on. So I just found that a little bit interesting. Was she like, is there still, because we know that her side is equally doing a PR thing as Justin's side may or may not be. You know what I mean? Did she draw the line at further heightening that narrative that she was racist? So she didn't subpoena people like Elsie. I mean, I was thinking about Lauren, and if Lauren lived in the UK, Lauren, Lethal Lauren, Court of Random Opinion. If she lived in the UK, we'd say she had an English rose complexion because she's very white with that like pink tinge to her cheeks. If she was over here, she'd be like whiter than white, you know what I mean? And yeah, I thought, well, I'm not aware of any of the content creators that are black, but if any of you are out there that know that she has subpoenaed people that are black or of colour, it would be interesting to know, because it'd be interesting to know how she decided who to subpoena and who not to subpoena, and whether it was about the public optics and all of that. But I thought that was an interesting thing that just popped into my head. So is race actually a problem for Blake? And that brings us back to that thing of, she is suing for her own public perception of how she is perceived. And we know this. And the thing is, everything that we're all talking about right now, it might very shortly all be just moot in language of the court. Because if this summary judgment thing happens, if they turn around and say after discovery is all complete, that all of the fact discovery completes, and there's nothing that can be ruled in a court of law, there's no legal argument that she has because the facts just aren't there, then all of this might just go away and we all might have been wasting our time. But it's been an interesting argument, an interesting conversation in the meantime. But yeah, Elsrich, if you're looking at her, she was very vocal, she was biased, she was insulting, mocking. She was also fearless and unfiltered and kept calling her that lady, that lady. Didn't she? You know what I mean? I think that was what tickled Billy Bush so much. It's just somebody just saying it how it is, which is what we should all really, in a way, feel free to say. So yeah, and it'll be interesting now. I'm expecting lots of emails later today from the court listener or whatever, because I think Perez has been busy again, hasn't he? And the judge will have to answer as to why Blake Lively's side can put photographs of Perez Hilton's children on that docket, and why that is not considered abusive or an overstep or a threat to their safety. You can't just say, well, he's sharing his photos on Instagram, so that makes it okay, because that's his right and his privilege to do it in a way that works for him. It's not her right to stick his children on the internet in a court docket, of all things, where the world's eyes are directed to it. You know what I mean? And people might be looking for a problem or to cause a problem. It really bothers me, the judge saying that Wayfarer's use of putting the deposition on the docket was abusive, and abusive to the court as well, because we've seen time and time again evidence of Blake's abuse. And as many people pointed out to me, which I'd forgotten, the whole Vin Diesel thing that kind of got whitewashed. The judge didn't object to having a 500-page transcript that was nothing to do with this case sat on the docket. And let's just see. But I just still hark back to my thing. I do think there's a thing going on Team Baldoni's side, and hopefully it's like Perez was saying yesterday, they're not worried at all. So he was saying they're not worried at all, so don't you be worried. And hopefully that is true. So yeah, going back to Brian Friedman and that snippet that's on the docket, that remained on the docket, I have a problem with that, because it literally is, whatever he did or said, it's all in the public domain. It's all out there. It's not sneaky. So in terms of her thinking that's to do with the smear campaign, it literally just how she feels about what he did. And how is that any kind of legal argument or strategy? And then the other thing that my mind was wandering to, because we're talking in terms of emotions, so when we're talking, I mean, feelings is what I work with all the time, so everything's about feelings. But then it wandered off to me, and I was starting to think about court and what that would look like, and how everybody's feelings would look out in the public domain when you're talking about just literally watching, Justin's testimony versus Blake's testimony. So we know that Justin is this incredibly emotional, empathetic person, and he's not afraid of talking about feelings. He's empathetic. So you imagine you get him on the stand and you start questioning him as to the impact, and you bear in mind that I do think it's likely and true, although I think that Blake tweaked the language and the severity of it. That time that we know about when Justin was forced to go and encounter Blake in her trailer to have a discussion about the wardrobe, and Sony being worried about what the public was talking about in terms of the wardrobe and how OTT it was, and she accused him of being embarrassing and breaking down in the trailer and keeping her trapped there for what, an hour, did she say, crying and blubbing basically. And I think that was an overstretch, but I do think he probably cried a bit, because you imagine he was under a lot of stress and strain. The budget's very much on his mind. She's going way over the top. Then he's getting it in the neck from Sony, and he knows he's to go and approach this really difficult person that can't be negotiated with and try and negotiate with her somehow. So he's going to be on the stand talking about all kinds of things like that, and the impact on his family and the impact on his business and the closure of his foundation and all of these kinds of things. Justin is going to be crying left, right and centre. He's going to be very emotive, and it's going to be that lovely deep voice of his that he's talking in. And it's going to be, you're going to see like that, if juxtaposition is the right word. Sometimes these big words pop into my head and I use them and then think, I don't know if that was the right scenario, but I'm just going with it. When you think of Amber Heard and Johnny Depp's testimony, how Amber Heard's testimony seemed so forced that she was really struggling to get a tear out and all of that. And then you had Johnny just go up on the stand and just be himself, really. Like him or not, he was just quiet spoken, that dry wit, that repeating whatever they asked him to repeat on the screen, and the whole mega pint thing and all of that, and that's, wry little grin. I'm not saying Justin's going to be like that, but you're going to get that same juxtaposition of somebody that looks very natural and like they're not trying to force anything, versus somebody who clearly does look like they're stretching and reaching to be perceived a certain way. And I think if it ever does get to trial, and I think there's still a big likelihood it won't. We're on this like precipice at the moment. It literally could just end in a second or not. It could go all the way. It's still a bit mysterious. But yeah, if it goes to trial, I was just sat thinking what Justin would look like on the stand and how compelling he would be, and how it would highlight the difference as well between the fact that when all this, because one of my early problems as well with the timing of it all, and I wondered if Justin had ever had a conversation with Blake about what Christmas meant to him or anything like that, because the timing of when she decided to drop that New York Times article and the CRD and all of that right before Christmas, because my first thought was, even if you felt so angry that you wanted to do it to him at that time, you wouldn't do it to your own family, because you wouldn't think like 4 days before Christmas, I want this to be front and centre on my family's mind, even if the children aren't aware of it. I don't want it in my mind or my husband's mind that this has been started. It's going to be something that we're all going to be involved in, and that's going to be hanging over the family Christmas, the family festive season. Is that what you'd really want? So I always had a problem with that at the start, because I think, well, was that purpose? Are you so cold that it doesn't even impact your family's Christmas starting something like that at that time of year? Or are you so cruel that you would do it to Justin? right over Christmas, and especially during because the fires were ongoing and things like that. And, we heard plenty about that, it was hard to serve the subpoenas and all of that because people were literally fighting fires left, right, and centre. So there's all going to be all of that in play. And you imagine when Justin gets talking about all of these kinds of things and the impact on him, he's going to be incredibly compelling to watch for a jury. Now, I would wonder, could Blake be equally compelling? Because I think she has a real problem getting feelings across. As soon as she starts trying to access feelings and what something feels like, she immediately looks down. It's like she's, trying to dig it up from the bowels of the earth or something. She kind of doesn't make eye contact and things like that. She's incredibly skittish about it, I would say. I know, like, I was watching some of the clips the other day, or I can't remember what the question was, but it was something to do with being on set and stuff, and she kind of went down and went, do one of you guys want to answer that? And she only then chipped in and answered when they were clearly struggling to answer it, you know what I mean, and came up with a lot of fluff. So even if she's coached a lot, it's very different when you get on the stand, I imagine, and have to do it like from memory, and you have to access your feelings and what's in your head and all of that. I think she'll find it very, very difficult. So what I was thinking in my notes is, will we feel that same emotive pull from her testimony when she says she couldn't get out of bed or look after her kids, but she could go do SNL, she could stand up and make that speech at times 100, she could go on Seth Meyers and the movie premieres and visits to the Friends Bakery and lunch with Salma Hayek and on and on and on, and she's going to have to argue that wasn't all about PR and things like that. So what else was I going to say? Something to do with Seth Meyers. Often when I make these notes, I can't even read my own writing. And because we didn't buy it, did we? Whenever she stood up, and she's been afforded some opportunities to kind of allude to this court case. So when she was on Seth Meyers and she spouted off that clearly rehearsed few sentences about, I can't, there's only so much I can speak to, but that whole fear is by design, and I'm so glad to have the opportunity to speak up for women and girls. Nobody was buying it except the audience that was being told to clap, basically. We didn't buy it. We didn't buy when she spoke up at times 100 and claimed that her mother was a victim, and again stood up as if she was this titan. And titan in this context means somebody who's impacted the world in a positive way. You know what I mean? It's, when I looked it up, what times 100 means, you to have had a significant impact on the world. It's people that are seen to have had strength, intellect, importance. I just think she will have terrible trouble connecting with a jury on an emotional level. I think that when they see Justin, they will see trauma. I don't necessarily think they will see trauma when Blake Lively gets on the stand. That's my personal feeling about it. But yeah, I think that's just it, really. I think that's all I was going to say for today, because until some more documents drop, it's kind of a quiet day. But I think the most compelling thing that I thought of the last day or so was, why wasn't anybody black that she subpoenaed? If she was literally looking for who were most pro-Baldoni, most problematic and all of that, why were they, as far as I know at this moment in time, why were they all white? Why was there a high proportion of women, and often like a high proportion of women who have suffered, this kind of SA or SH or anything like that? But I think the Elsrich thing was very, very interesting, because when you saw them collaborating and you have Elsie next to Lauren, and you think it literally highlights the difference when you see the very, very, very white lady with the pink glowing cheeks and the black girl next to her. Why go after the white lady and not the black lady, who's, you know, more vocal in the insults, really, and more clear, you know, because I think Lauren has said she's not Team Baldoni. It's not like she's Team Baldoni, it's Team what's going on, you know, and Team is this right or wrong. Whereas Elsie's like, you know, I don't even want to hear about Blake Lively, you know, being innocent. It's not a thing. It's not something that's on my conscience. But yeah, basically those were the thoughts bubbling around my head the last couple of days. I'm just running through my notes and checking if there was anything else. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see whether this guy Del Carajo TV has genuinely been subpoenaed and what the repercussions of that may be, because that's a big chunk of the world, isn't it? If you're talking about all the Latin American countries, and in terms of Ryan's businesses and both of them's future prospects, if you lose like an entire Latin American audience, it's no small thing, is it? So is this another dumb move on them that they're so focused on? I think, well, in a way, you could talk about the whole argument just being black and white, couldn't you, in a way, in terms of everything? Because if you think in the terms of the way she thinks Blake Lively, you know, the difference between her and Justin is black and white in a way, in terms of I can say anything, I can do anything, I can believe anything, I can tell you all of these things that you have done and you can't argue against any of them. It's this inability to have any flexibility. So yeah, that's just popped into my head. Is all of this really just this problem of what is white and what is black, in a way, you know? Because to get through this life successfully, you have to be able to roll with the punches, and you have to be able to take some hits and some failures, and you have to be able to hold your hand up and say when you're wrong and learn from your mistakes. Otherwise, what was the point in you being here? You know what I mean? You're not put here on this earth to be right all the damn time. Nobody is. You put down here to learn life lessons, aren't you? But it's as I said to somebody else the other day, we can, you know, it is that feeling inside me that there's a big part of me that still would like for Blake and Ryan, although I'm even more anti-Ryan. I just find him so hard to look at this point. It's not hate or anything like that. It's just I have a real visceral reaction to him because it's just the unfairness, I think, and the fact of him. I feel like he's the mastermind kind of thing. I think she's a bit unwitting and a bit dumb in some ways, but that doesn't make her innocent. But yeah, there's still a part of me that would wish that the upshot was that they would learn from it, you know, that they would grow, you know, just in terms of for themselves. But that's never going to happen. And the thing is, even if she loses, there will never be an apology. That will never be a part of it. She might apologise to the public, possibly in some backhanded kind of way, but she will never apologise to Justin. He'll never get that. And I still think that once you come out the other side of it, the next thing will be she'll write a book, or a book will be ghost written for her or something. This won't be the end of it because she'll never be able to drop that narrative that this was done to her. So there may be a time, you know, it may never have a line drawn under it, you know, because while ever there's a chance that one person out there in the world feels badly about her, she'll still feel that there's something to be argued about. It'll be interesting to see if she does lose, whether she does go away for a while and lick her wounds, because so far she's not shown an ability to be able to do that even. She's not shown a willingness to just do what Justin did and just take himself to Hawaii and just be quiet and just have family time and all of that, and allow it all like to play out in the hands of the lawyers, you know, put it in the hands of the people that can do something about it. We didn't see that from Blake, and I think that will all be called into question too, should it come to trial, because if she really felt that bad, if she really couldn't get out of bed, she wouldn't be able to handle, I don't think she would have been able to handle doing some of the things that she did do. You think of those awards, like that Times thing, that would have been an all-day process getting ready for that. You know, she's been sticking stuff on her Instagram, hasn't she, of the getting ready process when she's eating in the toilet and stuff, and showing you the way she does her hair and all of that. You know, if you're on your knees and it's been so bad, you would struggle terribly to do anything like that. You truly would, and I'm sure many of you out there have got stories of that. But you let me know what you think about this idea of, and let me know if you've heard if any of the content creators that subpoenaed were black. And like I say, I'm wondering if Blake only realises, you know, there's white and black, and there's no different ethnicities and all of that, you know what I mean? And how you think they would both translate on the stand as witnesses and all of that. You let me know what you think, and please do hit that like and subscribe and share if you're enjoying this content. It's an interesting discussion to have, I think. All right, thank you for watching. I will see you later.